So I've been a climate guy for about 15 years now. I think about 2013, 2012 was when I really started paying attention to climate, and started following technologies and political actions much more closely. At the time, it was totally hopeless, like absolutely hopeless. And since then, we have developed all kinds of amazing technologies that can really help us, that can save us, that can put a huge dent in it. Obviously, solar, wind, batteries, geothermal, lots of things in there that are absolutely amazing. And if I like to think if I went back to 2012 and 2013 and said in 2025 we'd have these things, that past Robert would say, wow, then everything's solved and everything's great, right? And no. Um, Obviously, lots of hurdles remain, but a huge one is that we aren't deploying them fast enough. Um, it's a huge problem. One of which is the very simple thing that we need to build a whole lot of wires. When America was first industrializing, like around like the start of the 20th century, from like 1900 to like 1950, we built a huge amount of wires. We built them everywhere, and we built them very rapidly. And then around the 1990s, we stopped. We don't really build them almost at all anymore. I think we build a percent or two more each year. It's very hard to build just wires, just poles and wires. It's very hard to get those built. And if we want to stop climate change, we'll have to expand the current grid by about 100%. We'll have to double it. We'll have to double the amount of wires we've ever built from like 1900 on, to stop climate change. And it is very intriguing that a lot of the people who are supposedly my political allies in this fight absolutely hate this. They absolutely hate the idea of just trying to build wires. They really hate the idea of trying to build anything. And I think a lot of this comes from the era when we first became aware of the environment in general, the 1960s, the 1970s. And back then, the only real way to save the environment was to stop things. It was not so much about trying to replace industry. It was about trying to stop industry altogether. But now, to stop climate change, we really have to build a lot more things, not just wires and poles, but also like factories, new power plants, new types of power plants. We need to build more like bike lanes. We need to build more transit. It's going to require a huge amount of concrete. It's going to require a huge amount of steel. We're going to have to cut down trees. We're going to have to tear down buildings. We're going to have to dig holes in the ground. We're going to have to use a lot of real big machines to tear up the earth in lots of places, to build the factories, to build the solar plants, to build the transit, to build the bike lanes, to make it possible for us to fight climate change. And I have to admit that in the past 10 years, I've been pretty dismayed. I don't think that this is going to happen. People absolutely hate building things. People absolutely hate change. And the people who advocate the most for trying to fight climate change are usually the people who also just hate the idea of a couple of keywords. They hate words like extraction. They hate words like infrastructure. They hate words like industry. They hate words like concrete, and they hate words like steel. Anything that has anything to do with any of those words, they don't want it. They want to set it on fire and watch it burn. Which is pretty depressing as a climate guy. This is brought to you because, I posted a little bit about AI yesterday, got some feedback, tried to listen and learn a little bit more about what's happening with AI in the world, about water usage, about electricity uses. I learned a little bit about, and so the thing was that I listened to a podcast about how like OpenAI has a bunch of huge facilities in South America, in places like Chile and Uruguay, and how they're in water stressed places. And the person who was talking about that pretty seamlessly transitioned from talking about how like they just took all this permanent infrastructure and just put it near these communities. They took this infrastructure and they just put it near these communities, and about how it was absolutely terrible and how they like really were in a drought and they didn't have enough water. And she had my sympathy. And then she transitioned pretty smoothly to being like, and they've suffered enough because of the lithium boom. Because there's been all these people trying to get all the lithium out of these countries too, to make batteries for electric vehicles. And she made it pretty clear that she thought this was bad. It was very bad that we went about and we dug holes in the ground to get out lithium. And that was when I started to feel really depressed. Because this is absolutely going to be the thing that holds us back. Like, I really kind of don't like OpenAI. I really don't like how all the AI guys are basically also the crypto guys, which I hate. But I also don't like that the attacks we're choosing to place upon them are very similar to the same attacks that people use right now to this day to stop people from building solar, to stop people from building transmission, and to stop people from building wind. Like, all these lines we're using about OpenAI, people are going to use against the things that I like, but here's the difference. They're actually going to stop the things that I like. The things that I like they're much harder to build. They take up a lot more space, and they have a lot more political enemies. So when people say things like, I want to stop all permanent like infrastructure in your communities, the first thing I think about is not OpenAI. It's going to be a solar field next to some town. That's what's going to die. It's not going to be OpenAI. They're way too valuable. It's going to kill the solar fields. And this was kind of funny because I was talking about this and someone said, well, you should really write a cli-fi book. You should really write a climate change science fiction story that kind of rolls all this in there. And I thought, well, I kind of did. It's the Tainted Cup. Like, the Tainted Cup could be that could be read as a climate book. Because you've got this huge threat from the water that happens every couple of years and requires a huge amount of resources to protect people against. But then you have these very wealthy, corrupt few who have abused the laws of the nation to protect lands and say, like, hey, we want you to use these lands to help fight the Titans, but we just want to be really, really, really careful. So let's be as careful as possible. But they don't actually want to do that. What they really want to do is keep things the exact same. They don't want society to progress. They don't want any new solutions. They don't want to make anything better, because if things stay the exact same, they get so much richer. And because of that, because things are frozen in place and are so sclerotic, the Titans break down the walls. They get in and they destroy everything. Because we are so frozen in place and refuse to change and cannot even imagine how much work it will take to change. Everything loses. So, I mean, it's very simple and it's in there. And I think it speaks to a lot of the problems about how the state is organized, about how states build and grow and change and then get frozen in place because people like things exactly how they are. And it's really a question of if states can change or if they get change. And usually when they get changed by making a lot of people die or having a lot of people die. And I'd really prefer to avoid that. But at the same time, it is so easy to imagine the Hazas in the book paying all these like officials to go out and saying, like, yeah, are you really going to build all this permanent infrastructure in your communities? You're going to build all these permanent infrastructures in your communities? How dreadful. How perfectly dreadful. And then in the background, the seawalls crumble.